I need quiet. Let me get
All right,
going.
so I did just start the recording. As you guys know, tonight is Open Tournaments 102, and so we're going to kind of move a little deeper into the open format tournaments. I do have the tournament set up again. That's named Open Tournaments 102, and we're going to use on-site registration, predefined weights this time, which is going to be different. The main difference between Open Tournaments, which 101, which was the grouping wizard. And then we'll do a call to match system again too. And we'll do printing again, but the electronic bouts courses start next week for those of you that are interested. So I think they start next Monday, but double check on the course schedule for that. And so I'm going to kind of review and kind of run quickly through the items that were covered in 101 and then go into the things in more depth. So I'll do a quick review, kind of skim over the things we've already covered, those things that you guys probably already know, and then we'll go into depth into the new items. So I don't have a lot of feedback here tonight, but I think just because it tends to come out better in the videos with, and that way you guys don't have to worry about being silent and keeping your families silent if you're at home and things like that. So I think I'll probably just shut the mics down. Again, as always, use the chat. Let me know if there's something you need right away. This course we did last week too, and it runs, should be just under an hour, about 45 minutes or so kind of running through, and then we'll take questions. And again, I'm always happy to stay on as long as you guys need afterwards. So unless anybody has something right away, I'm going to just shut the mics down and get started. And again, just let me know if you need anything using the chat. All right, so we're going to get started here now, and we're going to just log into our tournament as we always do by going to Manage and Tournaments. Some of you have a track account. If you haven't done so already, just go ahead and get to our homepage and set that up, and then you'll notice that once I log into my track account, or my track account, which in my case is Shane Track, I can just go to the tournament that I need and click it, and I get logged right in. So that's kind of a different thing. I know I've mentioned that in other courses, but feel free to use that. That's new this year, and it also logs you into profiles and things like that. So any tournaments you're working with, you can get into pretty easily from there. The first thing that you'll notice is our to-do list is going to be different than it was in Open Tournaments 101, which was a Madison block bracketing. We're not going to use or have to add any mats in this case unless we're running electronically, which we're not tonight. We are going to be adding weight classes, which is different, which is divisions and adding weights to our divisions right there. And then obviously building our brackets is going to be a different too. At this point in the tournament, again, I'm just going to kind of cruise through a few items. Again, planning is really important, and I mention this in all the classes only because it's usually, if there's a downfall that people have, it's typically in the planning. So just make sure you have a good plan with your computers and your internet connection and all of those sorts of things. You may have already imported some settings, but I am going to import a couple things here tonight to show you that again and to speed up the setup process. And then the settings page, as we went through, I can go into the setup and the settings page. Again, just kind of skim over these, or actually not even really touch on many of those, but you would have already set up all of these things. For those of you that do have questions about that settings page, make sure you let me know when we're all done. The next step would be going to our deadlines, so that's in our setup menu under deadlines. And I am going to touch on this because this is something we get questions on a lot, and actually I've had questions on from those of you that have taken the other courses. And the deadline in the open tournament is mainly used to determine when you're going to release the brackets to the public. This other deadline that's here, this lockout statisticians, many of you aren't going to even use that, but some of you may if you're using statisticians. And all a statistician is that team representative that's chosen by you or whoever from the team. It's usually a coach, but it's the person that's responsible for entering the team's roster. So rather than you entering them in the on-site, or maybe you don't have a pre-reg or something, you can set up statisticians for the teams. The varsity tournaments course covers that in pretty good depth. So for those of you that have taken that class, you've probably already seen that. Otherwise, if you want to refer to the videos in that, it's probably maybe a third of the way through those videos or something like that. So, but those are the two deadlines here. Not a lot going on with the deadlines, mainly just releasing to the public. And then, of course, I'd go into my next step in my to-do list, which is going to be adding bracket types. And in the setup, I'll go to bracket types. And again, a lot of this is just review, but I do want to show you that I'm going to add a few different brackets here. I'm going to assume this is a little larger tournament, and I'm going to add the 16-man wrestle back to second, place 6. So I'm just going to come here and add this one. And then I'm also going to accommodate for, or I guess kind of plan for those smaller brackets, even though I'm maybe going to shoot for 16. I'm also going to do a similar bracket only in an 8-man. So if I go way to the bottom to the 8-mans, I'm going to go the wrestle back to second, place 6, which is right here. And then finally, just in case I have some small ones, I'm going to do the 4-man round robin, which is right there. So I'm adding my bracket types, and then I'm going to add my divisions just like I did in the other tournaments. And come into setup, groups and divisions, and I'm going to add just one group. If I click the add group, and I'm just going to call this 5th and 6th grade. I'm going to do folk style, and I'm not going to worry about my entry fees in this tournament. So I click on the add, and that gets added there. And you'll notice that I'm using grades here. You could use age groups or whatever the case might be. That's completely up to you. So now I'm going to add my weight classes, and this is a new step for those of you that watch the 101 tournament and only have run with a grouping wizard. But it's pretty simple to do that. All I'm going to do is go into groups and divisions, of course. If I click on my group, there's going to be an add weight class button right here. So I just go ahead, I click the add weight class, and I'm going to add just a couple, and I'm actually going to import these later just to save time. But if I type 60, which is going to be the weight class that I add, and I hit the tab, you'll notice that it moves over, and now you see it highlighted there. My max weight is 60, and most of you are going to leave that. So what I could do right now is hit add. If I wanted to change this to say 61, maybe you're giving a 1 pound allowance or something like that, but you still want that weight class to be called 60, you could do that. And that way when you enter an actual weight, they'll fall into anybody that kind of falls in between this, 60 and 61, maybe it's 60.7 or whatever the case might be, they'll still be able to go into that 60 weight class. So just know that that's what that max weight is. I'm going to put it back and keep it simple. I don't need to select a bracket type yet. If you're adding a weight and you're only using a particular bracket for that weight class, you could do that. But I'm just going to click add. And then, of course, I would go ahead and add another weight. Maybe it's 65. I can tab it over and hit add and go from there. So again, that max weight, you can also change it from this page if you need to. So I would go through and, of course, add all my weight classes. I'd probably add my other groups and do the weight classes at the same time. But to speed things up and just to show you the importing process again, I'm going to go into Setup and Import Settings. And I'm going to pick my tournament. And the tournament I'm going to be importing from is one that was in Westby. And I'm going to use this one right here. It's going to be the Folk Style Regionals. And I know that they have weight classes that will work well for our class tonight. So the things that I'm going to import, I won't do all of them, but I could. I'm going to do the groups and the weight classes, and I'm also going to bring in the teams right there. And the statisticians. We're not necessarily working with statisticians, but those two things come together. I will make a note that in order to import weight classes, you need to bring in a group too. Those two items are tied together as we just kind of went through. So if you just try bringing in weight classes without groups, they won't come because our system needs to know what groups that they're going to be tied to. So then I would go ahead and, of course, click there, and I'm going to import. And that will bring in the items. So if I look at my groups now, you'll see that now I have these. This is an easy way to know my date of birth ranges. You obviously want to double check those, but if you know that they're correct, you can go ahead and import them. And I'm going to, for our sake, delete this one out that I added already. And I type delete entire group. And now that group goes away. So these are the ones that I actually want to use tonight, and I got those imported pretty quickly. So some other things just to kind of cover before we move ahead. At this point, I want to make sure that the team points section is set up. I can do that in the setup, of course, and go to scoring. you know, if you're not using team scoring, you probably don't have to worry about anything there, but I would go through and double check those. I'd also want to look at my rounds page just to make sure. And you'll notice here that the system, like it always does, is going to put things in a round order. And you'll notice that what makes sense is the 16-man bracket is going to be bigger, excuse me, and it's going to have more rounds than, say, the 8-man. So in most cases, it's going to try and run those and kind of evenly space them out. You'll also notice that these round robins kind of get spaced out over the course of the tournament. You can make adjustments to this. Probably in this situation, you might even start combining some rounds here. You might put these rounds together and combine them into one. We're not going to cover that here tonight. We do have a course coming up that's going to cover some of those more complex things when you have, you know, larger tournaments and things like that. For most of you, you could leave them. It wouldn't really cause you much of an issue, but just make sure you look at your rounds page and see that everything looks okay there. So the next item is going to be in our number schemes, and I want to set those up. And there's a lot of confusion here, and I cover this every time too, but one way to think of a number scheme is just a way to add bout numbers to the matches in your tournament. Because if you skip this and you don't add a number scheme, you're basically going to have every chart in your tournament's going to have a bout number 1. Everyone's going to have a bout number 2, and sometimes that can lead to confusion. In other cases, that's just fine. We do recommend that you put bout numbers on these and use a number scheme. You don't have to, but we think it probably saves some confusion for both wrestlers and parents and people watching at home. Certainly, if you're ever going to run electronically, it's a good thing to do, and we'll get to that in the electronic bouts course, but it's probably a good habit to get into. So all I want to do to set those up is I'm going to come into my setup and hit number schemes. And I could do this, an easy scheme to do would be all, and I could just select all mats, all groups, all rounds, and maybe I do want to start that with number 1, and now go ahead and add it. And then that gets added, and all this is going to do is take every bout in my tournament and number it 1 through, I don't know, 500, whatever the number of bouts might be. But some of you also might want to do things a little bit differently. You might want to separate this out a little bit. And in my case, I'm going to add one that's for boys, 04, 05, 04, 04, 04, 05. And then all I'm going to do is I'll go all mats, but then I'm of course just going to pick that one particular group. I'll do all the rounds. And in this case, I'm going to start these with 2001 because maybe, you know, it's just a nice way for them. So now all these boys that are wrestling in this group, if there's a bout number that has that starts in that is in the 2000s, they're going to know that it's one of theirs. And then I can also do one for like boys 02, 03, I think the other one was. All mats, I would pick that particular group, all rounds, and I would probably start this with like 3001. So either way, and maybe you'd go 1001 to 2001. That might even make more sense, but however you want to do that, that's just fine. So number schemes, complicated at times. Once you understand them, they're pretty important and pretty nice way to keep your tournament running smoothly. So I'm going to copy over to the testing site now. I'm sorry, I had somebody click in there with a question. And all I'm going to do from here is go to the setup menu and import settings and go to the bottom and then copy over to the testing site. So now you're at a point where you're ready to start working on your tournament. You get the basic setup going and you're ready to start kind of practicing. And even if you've run a lot of tournaments, if you're ever doing anything different, you just want to, you know, kind of refresh yourself, the testing site is a great place to be. I can tell you that all of us here at Track Wrestling, when we ever, you know, are working on tournaments and things like that, we're on the testing site all the time, and it's you know, we do an awful lot of tournaments, and I can tell you that I spend an awful lot of time on the testing site just making sure things are running correctly. So it's a really good idea to get here and practice. We do see that the people that are on the testing site tend to do better, and the tournaments run, you know, with fewer issues. So we will encourage you, as I always do, to get over there. So I'm just going to log in here to my tournament, and this is Open 102. And of course, log in just as I always do. Oh, I don't want to do that. All right. Now I think I got the right one. There it is. And so now I'm logged in. I think we covered this in the other class, but if I look at my, wrestlers, you'll notice I don't have any here, and this is possibly going to be the case for you, especially if you're using a pre-registration. You won't have anybody in here, and you probably won't have the numbers that you need in here. So an easy way to do this is to go ahead and add random wrestlers. So in the testing site, in our left menu, I go to Operations, and then I'm going to use this one for Add Random Wrestlers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 700. So you'd probably want to pick the number that you think you're going to get in your tournament, just so it's kind of realistic. Helps you get a feel for the numbers in the weight classes and puts kids in the kind of the brackets that you're going to be seeing. I'm going to add them to my existing weight classes because I'm using weight classes tonight. I imported teams, so I'm going to add those to teams, which is going to be helpful. And then I'm going to use just the max weight here. So it's going to assign the weights to the wrestlers using the max weight. Our actual weight really isn't that important here in this testing situation for weight classes, but I don't need to put a weight range in there. But then I'm going to put these across all the groups. And so I think I have 7 groups here. And so this is going to put about 100 into each group. So I just add the random wrestlers. And that happens pretty quickly. And then now, of course, when I go to my wrestlers page, you'll see that I have a bunch of these wrestlers here. Another good way to look at this is if I go to my groups and divisions, this is an easy way to see where I'm at in each of my divisions. So there are no separation criteria in here, but that's okay for our purposes. We're just going to kind of bracket them to give us an idea of how that all works. So we're kind of working through, right? The week of the event, I want to make sure I'm still practicing here as we've talked about. And then the night before my event, just want to make sure you're all ready to go. Again, I can't talk about planning enough. Make sure that you're set up ahead of time. Make sure you get all your printers working and test them. There's really nothing worse than having people show up in a gym and say, oh, this computer is not working. And if you've tested that the day before, the night before, of course, then you can take care of that. So I'd probably print my weigh-in cards. So I'd come into registration, and I go to printing, and I go to weigh-in cards. And of course, this is a good thing to do the night before. I can sort these however I want. I can go by group, and then maybe I'd want to go by weight class as they come in. You can select only one group or whatever the case might be. But for most of you, you're going to be able to just kind of do that. And then I hit the print cards button. And this will open these up. And if I do a print preview, if that page opens, I'll make this bigger. And we'll go to landscape. And this is what they're going to look. Ooh. Yep, that's landscape. And so you'll see that you can just kind of cut it in fourths. And then you go out there, you get the actual weight right here. This number will be handy in just a few minutes. It's actually a unique number for each wrestler in your tournament. So it doesn't mean anything based on other tournaments. It's just a unique number that gets assigned to them within your tournament. So again, you'd print those out, cut them up, and get ready for your registration. You can also print a blank one. Not sure if I covered this before, but if I go to registration and printing, and I go to weigh-in card template, from here is where I could just print the blank one. So these would look the same, only they're just blank, and that would be for those walk-ups that come in. You can just have them fill out that card and take it to the weigh-in, and you'd be all set to go. During the registration, we recommend that you use a double check system, which is just a way to make sure that you haven't gotten a wrong group or a weight class for a wrestler. The more of that stuff you can alleviate and take care ahead of time, you can make bracket changes after they're built. It's quite easy in track wrestling, but those are stressful times when you have a gym full and you're trying to run your tournament. So the more of this stuff you can get accurate from the start, the better. So the kids would come back with their weigh-in cards, or they'd have their actual weights on it now, and they'd come back in, and then somebody in the registration would come here and they'd go to the on-site registration. So registration, on-site. And then I could pick a default group here if I wanted to. Let's say we're going to do 04, 05. And then I could enter my wrestler here. So let's say it's Randall Cobb, maybe. And I'd pick his weight class. Say he's a 51. Pick an existing team. Maybe he's from Ashland. Or if I needed a new team, say they didn't have one, I would just enter it in here. And then that would then show up in the list from there on out. And then if I needed any of this other stuff, I'd put it in there, and then I go to register them. And it would go right to the next one. The double check system, so I'd just go through in there. The double check system, the way that we recommend doing that, and you might have different ways to do this, but I'd go to registration, and on this weigh-ins page, I can either type the first few letters of the wrestler's name, or if you remember that ID number, I could just look at that card and maybe it was 265, and I don't even know who this is. But that would bring up the person. So I would look at that. It would have a weight class on it. Somebody would have marked it one time, maybe initialed it, however you're going to do it. I would come back and look, oh, no, you know what, that's the wrong weight class, and then I'd switch him. He's actually 240, and I would update that, and that's okay. Yeah, it's saying that he weighs too much to go there, so we'll leave him there. But that's kind of how that process would work. So double check system we think is a really good idea for you to do. And if I need to make changes to any of those wrestlers, I certainly can at that point. The next item, we covered this in the other class as well, but deleting no-shows. I'm sorry, in the registration. So deleting no-shows, this is basically going to delete anybody who didn't weigh in. So if I go to my wrestler list, you'll notice that everybody has an actual weight here. And if I click the weight header, this column is going, oh, there you go, Randall didn't have a weight. That worked out well. So as I toggled this, it's going to bring the heaviest wrestler to the top. If I click it again, it's going to bring the lightest, which of course with no weight there, it's going to bring him to the top. And I just want to look at this to make sure the number of no-shows that I have seems like a reasonable amount. And when I could click on him, and I could also do delete selected participant. And if you have one, that's probably fine. But if you have a bunch here, you can just run this delete no-shows function, and that'd probably do all the groups. But if you're doing multiple weigh-ins, this is why you could sort this out, because you don't want to delete wrestlers who didn't weigh in if they haven't had a chance to weigh in yet. So I just go ahead and remove, type delete no-shows, and now you'll notice that if I click these columns, everybody has an actual weight, and my Randall Cobb is gone. So that's an easy way to get yourself ready for weigh-ins. The next step, and this is going to be brand new for those of you that have never run predefined weights before, the next thing is going to be to check in my groups and divisions. So I'm going to registration. You'll notice also that the groups and divisions is in most of these menus, but when I go to groups and divisions, I want to check in each group to kind of scan the weight classes. So let's say I'm using this 0405, and I want to scan these weight classes just to see if everything looks okay. And what I'm seeing here is I have this is just kind of, again, these examples just kind of showed up, but here we have a weight class with 1 and a weight class with 2. You know, I might want to combine those just to get them a few matches. So I would go ahead and I would just put check marks next to both of those weight classes, and then I would come up to combine selected. And I'm going to rename the weight class, and this was a 69 and a 72. I would probably do something like 69 and 72 instead of naming it something else, because you know that parents are going to come looking for the 69-pound weight class, and if they don't see it, they might be confused. So if I add it this way, usually parents can find themselves in there. So again, you can do that differently. Again, in these courses, it's just kind of a nice time to kind of put some little tips and suggestions that work both for us and for other people that we have running tournaments. So, but anyway, there's our new weight class, and you'll notice that there's 3 wrestlers in there now. So again, I would kind of scan through, you know, maybe this is another one I would combine, but for the sake of tonight, we'll just use that one, or combine that one, I should say. And so the next item would be to, once I've scanned all the weights and they look good, I've deleted all my no-shows, I'm going to go ahead and build my brackets. And so first thing I want to do is I'm going to come into bracketing, and I'm going to assign weight classes to wrestlers. What this is basically going to do is to make sure that every wrestler has a weight class selected. And you'll notice that a little bit ago I changed the weight class for a wrestler. If Randall Cobb, for instance, didn't have a weight class, he wouldn't be put on a bracket. We want to make sure that everybody has that. And all I do is come to that, assign weight classes to wrestlers. I select them all, and I click. I could just do a few of them too if I was just bracketing a few, but I assign them. And this is really the message that I want to hear. I want to see that no wrestlers had to be assigned, and that's good. Otherwise, it'll tell me how many were. So the next item then, as I work through, and it's really important to do these in order, and on this, I'll just show you this. On the build brackets, it walks through these exact steps. So make sure you're hitting all these, because sometimes people miss them, and that's what kind of messes up their brackets. But I'm going to come into bracketing, and you'll notice that these links are all right here, but I'll just show you. If I go to bracketing, and I'm going to assign brackets to a weight class. What this is really doing is it's just going to kind of provide a roadmap for our system to say, all right, if there are 16 wrestlers, I'm of course going to put them on a 16-man bracket. If there are 8 wrestlers and down, it's going to put them on an 8, and 4 and on down, it's going to, put them on the right bracket. What I can do, let's say for instance, for whatever reason, let's say I wanted to put my 4-man groups on a 8-man bracket. I would just click it to remove it, and then I would come up here and I'd say groups with 4 are going to go on the 8-man bracket. And then I would go ahead and add it, and you'll notice it gets added right here at the bottom. I'm not sure what kind of sense that makes, and so I really don't want that. All I really want to do then is if I come back and I reload this page, assign brackets to weight classes, if I reload it, you'll notice that it resets this page. You're probably not going to need to make any changes here, but if you do, that's how you do it. And then all I'm going to do then is check mark these as I did before, and I'm going to assign bracket types. It says 114 weight classes were assigned. One weight class was not. That's one that probably has one wrestler, and I think we combined that one, but there's only one wrestler. It's not going to be put in a bracket. So you really want 0 there. In that case, if I saw one, I would come back to groups and divisions, and I would search through to find out which one it is. And you'll see that it'll be, there won't be a bracket type selected here. So I'm not going to take the time to look for that tonight just for time's sake, but that's definitely something you'd want to just make sure why that's happening there. And then my last step, of course, would to, I go to bracketing, and then I would build and delete brackets. So again, I would probably just use these red links from here. As you get more comfortable with the system, you'll probably do the same. But all I'm going to do then is come here. I'm going to go to just do this one division. I could do them all at the same time. And I'm just going to draw all the seeds. I'm not worried about seeding. I just want to throw them on brackets. And I go ahead and I click Build, type Draw because I'm drawing them in and not seeding them. And now I just had 17 brackets built, just like that. If I come back here in this group, or I can do it from here, I guess, and we're here. If I go to Groups and Divisions, and I check in my group, this 0405, you'll notice now that all this yellow went away. The seeds were saved because they got put on the bracket, and the brackets were built. And again, it's built on these bracket types right there. I do want to go back and just kind of run through quickly the seeding. Seeding can get pretty in-depth, and we do have, again, another course that's coming later that's going to focus just on all these different ways to seed. But I do want to point out some of the options that are there for you. Quite honestly, most of you are going to just do what I just did probably. You're just going to put them on the brackets. I guess one point I will make, if you wanted to hand seed, because that's not really, that's more of a, not an automated type system, but if I go to, Groups and Divisions, and let's say I go to this group, if I click on a weight class, let's use 63, I could use these drop downs right here to go ahead and I could seed these wrestlers out. So if you had somebody that you wanted to seed, manually, that's how you do it. But our system also does a lot of different seeding. So again, in bracketing and seeding, and you'll notice it's just another one of these links right here. I could go ahead and let's say in the 02s, 03s, I could click here to use the Trackwrestling rank values. So I'd click it. This would use the rank values that they have on their profile. So anybody with a rank value, which is just about everybody, I could use that to rank it. And that would say what the lowest rank would be to get a seed, and then also say, oh, they have to have like maybe 5 track wrestling events or something like that. So you can seed based on the rank values. You could seed based on your separation criteria values. And so I could use this link to go ahead and I would pick maybe I want only all the goods and excellence to be seeded, and it would do that and keep them apart in the brackets. You could also use a point system in the extra field. And so in the registration, you could set up an extra field that said, I don't know, maybe you had a point system in a league or a tournament, series of tournaments that maybe you run. And maybe if one wrestler had 800 points and the other wrestler had 500 points, they would be seeded accordingly. And that's how you do that. I can delete the current seeds assigned to any wrestlers in a group, or all groups for that matter, right here. And then we could also assign a separation criteria value based on their ranks. That would be more used in Madison block bracketing. But again, there are some different ways here. Maybe on the testing site, you might want to mess around with that. Again, if you're more interested, if you have tournaments that are going to run using that sort of method, there's a course coming up that will cover that in great detail, because there is quite a bit there. That's a lot of information. So I did this, but the next thing I want to do is come into groups and divisions, and I just want to verify to make sure that all my brackets are built. And I only built the ones in 0405. And you'll just notice that that went away. I just want to make sure that there's no yellow here. If I look through my other groups, remember we would find one bracket that wasn't built, because that was that one with either 1 or 0 wrestlers. And then once I have my brackets built, and I only did the one group, of course, but I'm going to apply my number schemes. So I come over to operating, go to number schemes, and in my case, I would uncheck them and then just use this 0405. And then from here, actually I'll show you this first. So if I go to my bout schedule, which I can get to from the operating menu, or once I'm in this tournament wizard, worker wizard right here, I can click on bout schedule. You'll notice that all these bouts are created, but there's no bout numbers, and that's what I want to get rid of. There's just question marks there. I'm just going to select my 0405, and I'm going to apply the selected scheme. I'm going to leave the frozen status as it is right now because I haven't built yet. If you needed to rebuild, there are times where you might freeze the existing bout numbers and just renumber the ones that you made changes to. Or if you wanted to wipe all the numbers out and start all over, if you've already numbered and you want to number again, this is how you do that with the unfreeze. But for me, I'm going to leave it as it is because it doesn't really matter, because it's the first time that I've applied these. And I'd go ahead and do this. And as you might already know, now you see that I have my bout numbers created. I can filter this by group too. I only have one group created, but can use that. As you go through your tournament, you'll probably use this quite a bit. And now from this bout schedule, I would print my brackets from here. I'll click here and print my brackets. And then I would also print bout sheets from here too. I will make one point here. Some of you, if you ever need a blank bracket, I'm sorry, a blank bout sheet, I can do that too, and I can do that from the left menu if I go to print documents. If I go to bout sheets, bout sheets, I click that. I want to go to the advanced settings, and so there's kind of a few steps here, but so if you ever need to do this and can't remember, just be sure to either go back to the video, I guess, or just ask us. But in the advanced settings, you'll notice, I'm going to blow this up. You'll notice that there are two added HTML areas here. This one here that's got an image tag behind it. These are the actual lines on the bracket. It's just an image that goes on that page. And then all this other stuff is the entry. This is where our system's going to grab the information about the wrestlers and put it in there. If I change this to hide entry, and I go to view this sample, you'll see that now all the stuff that you usually see in your bout sheets is gone, and this is just a blank one. You could write it in if you wanted to, and you'd be able to print them out and then write on them if you needed to. So I'm going to flip this back to show entry, and then now back to normal. So that's how you print a blank bout sheet. Just kind of an added little sample there for you, a little extra tip. And now I'd go through and enter my bout results. So I'd go through and enter bout results. I go to the operating and bout entry. And if I come in here, I'm just going to put in 2003 and hit go. And I pick my winner. Again, you guys know how to do this. And maybe that was a decision. And I go to, maybe it was 3-9, and I hit save. And I just go right ahead and continue on. If I entered a wrong score, of course, I can make that change here too. I can update any of those corrections if I needed to. And then the other, I'm sorry, I just had a message come in again. So I enter a few of those, but from a testing standpoint, you don't want to probably enter those in. So I'm going to come over to the left menu, and I'm going to enter these bout results. I'm going to come here to enter bouts. And then for me, I'm going to use bout numbers. The maximum I'm going to use is, so I'm going to go 2001 through, let's say 2050. And that probably in this case simulates, a certain number of matches or maybe even a round or something. And so now I entered a bunch of those bouts really quickly. If if I go to my bout schedule, you'll notice that these green ones are already done. And so pretty quickly I was able to do that. Again, as a reminder, anything green is done. Anything white is ready to be printed if you're printing bout sheets. And the yellows, of course, are waiting for results from a previous match. And we don't know who's in those matches yet. You can also make corrections from the bout schedule. Somebody comes up and says, oh, you got the score wrong. I can click on a bracket here, can view the bracket, and then I can go to any particular match, and that'll open that match as well. And I could switch the winner. Maybe that was 3-2 or something like that, and make the update there. So again, easy way to make changes. So you just kind of continue on through your tournament like that. Now, the one thing that comes up occasionally is maybe you want to run prelims in your tournament. And a prelim is something, we call them prelims. You might call them pigtails or rat tails. And basically they're just matches that are wrestled to get into the tournament if you have more. Maybe in our case, we didn't want to run this 16-man bracket and we only wanted 8. If we had a weight class with 10 wrestlers, we could add prelims to that. I can add the prelims ahead of time, set them up in the system. They're only going to be added if a weight class has more wrestlers than will fit on the bracket. So you don't have to worry about if you add them that they'll get that they'll get added when they're not needed. That won't happen. And all of our prelims are double elimination. So they'll be around to get into the championship bracket, and then the losers of that round then would have to wrestle to get onto the consolation bracket. And again, they're always added when they're necessary. I will note that you can't add them to round robins, which probably makes perfect sense, but we do get that question every now and then. So the way that we do this is if I come into my setup menu, I think it's in the left menu too, and I go to prelims. And actually, good point. So you notice I don't see prelims here. What I want to do is go to my settings page, go down to this area that says use prelims here, flip that to yes. And then now when I go back to my setup menu, my prelims are here. So that's the case with a few different areas of Trek Wrestling. If you're not seeing something you expect to see, just go ahead and check the settings page. A lot of times that's going to be the issue. So at this case, I could go ahead and now I have prelims selected. The prelims are going to be randomly placed on the bracket, and they're going to be evenly distributed. So if there were 2 prelims on an 8-man bracket, one would be on the top side, one would be on the bottom side, and they would be randomly placed. So anybody in the bracket would be, have an equal chance of getting that. But I can add a prelim assignment. And so what I'll do is, if I wanted to do that, I'll add a prelim assignment. And a good idea, and I'm gonna kind of do one because I know what I'm gonna do here, but that's the wrong bracket type. But if I pick the 8-man, for instance, and I view the sample, I would have a plan as to, okay, maybe I want my last seed to get the prelim and then the second to last seed. So you'd kind of want to have a plan there. But if I go ahead and add my prelim assignment, what I'm going to do in my case is, let me just look to make sure I'm going to do this right. I'm going to use the 8-man bracket, which I already have here. And like my scenario was, I want the 8 and 9 seeds to wrestle the 1 seed on this bracket. If we look here, so I want the 8 and 9 seeds to wrestle this prelim out here, and they're going to go here, and they're going to have the good fortune to wrestle the top seed. So the winner, of course, I'm going to have the winner go to the bottom of bout 1, which makes sense that that's bout 1, and I found that by looking right here. So that's where I want the winner to go of that prelim, and then I want the loser then to wrestle the 7 seed to get onto the consolation bracket. So I'm going to have the loser wrestle for the bottom of 8. And I would just go ahead and add that. So you would have a plan, you'd go through, you'd add all these. If you wanted, if you thought you're going to need 3 prelims, you would add those. It's okay to add more than you think you'll need. You'd want that before you added less. So this is a really good thing to play around on the testing site because sometimes it's confusing at first. But the only time you would ever add a prelim assignment is if you wanted to specify where it went. Again, most people are going to put them in randomly, but you certainly do have the option to add where and specify where those go. Once I add those in there, I can move them up and down. In my case, I'd probably want this to be my first prelim that gets added, but maybe there's a different order that I wanted, and that'd be fine. The other thing that you'll notice on this page is the prelim scoring. And so we are going to score the prelims by default, but it's only going to be bonus points or activity points. I'm not going to score or give them any advancement or I'm not going to give them any advancement points there. So I could go ahead and change that if I wanted to. And then the next step with prelims is to go to the rounds page. And so they get added, but they're not on a rounds page yet. And so typically you'd have a prelim right at the beginning, and then you'd come back after kind of the first round. But again, we have lots of bracket types here. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to add a round, and I'm going to call this prelim round 1. And again, this is that first round before the first round of actual wrestling. And then what I'm going to do is I'm only going to use this 8-man, but I'm going to number these. I'm going to specify here prelim match IDs, and I'm going to use prelim match IDs 1 through 4. And I use 1 through 4 only because that's the maximum number of prelims I could have on this bracket to put them on there. Now I'd save the round detail. And you'll notice it gets added way down here at the end. So I'm going to move that in just a minute. I would come back then, I'd add another round for prelim round 2. And in this case, I'm going to use prelim match IDs. I'm going to specify here. And these we're going to use 51 to 54. And that's just the way that our system needs to see it. So if you're ever not sure on this part, we definitely would help you out. And I'm going to move those to the appropriate places. So I want these scheduled, these right off the bat. So I'm going to click move, put that to number 1, and that'll move up to the top. And then I know from here that if I click move, I know that I want this to be 5th. So I click it, put that 5. And you'll see that those get moved there. And I just save this round order and invoke it. And now right off the bat, my prelims are going to go. We're going to wrestle kind of the first round of the winner's side, and then we're going to come back with the next round of the prelims. And so that's kind of how the prelims go there. So prelims can be a little tricky sometimes. Again, testing site is a great way to put those in there and play around with them. Those are something that we'd be more than happy to help you with too, if that is a need that you might have. So I'm going to get to questions here in just a minute. I do want to thank you guys again for joining us. We do appreciate the time that a lot of you are spending here and taking these courses. We do feel that they are hopefully of benefit to you. We got some other ones coming up. I am trying to schedule. We are trying to schedule when we're going to do the next round of classes. So be watching for that. I'm hoping to get that going tomorrow. Remember the discounting that we do have, and many of you have taken advantage of that for multiple classes. And then, as always, if you have a question you think of after we're done here tonight, feel free to call in. We are on the phone lines from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. That's Central Standard Time. And our ticket system we monitor during those same hours. So those are both good ways to get a hold of us. So at this point, I'm just going to open the mics back up and see what questions you guys might have. Okay, so I think those mics are back open. If anybody has questions, now's a good time. I did have one that got chatted in, and I didn't see it right away. And it was from Matt. He said, and you guys probably saw it. That thing gets buried on my screen sometimes. If you import the date of birth from older tournaments, we have to adjust them to the new year. Yes, you will actually. It'll bring them in exactly as they were. So you would just need to update those years. So that's a good question, but that is in fact how that works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm sorry I missed that one as we were going along there.
No, that's not a problem.
Yeah. So the importing is going to bring it in identically. So.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions? I know a lot of that was kind of review. I think that the big things were the bracketing. Any questions on building brackets there, using weight classes versus the grouping wizard? Hopefully, as you go through and you use that to-do list, I think this, if there are ever issues, if I can find it, if there are other issues, it's a lot of times skipping one of these first 2 steps, assigning the wrestlers to weight classes or or not assigning bracket types. So if you follow those instructions kind of one by one, usually you have pretty good luck with building brackets here. So pretty simple to do, hopefully. Anybody else? Questions at all? Quiet group tonight. Must be Monday, but it's not, I guess. Well, I am happy to stay on. If those of you that have to go or want to sign out, that's just fine too. Again, if you want to stick around for a minute and ask more questions, I'll just kind of hang here for a couple minutes. And if nobody has questions, then I guess I'll kind of wrap it up for the night. I'll probably stop the recording here in just a minute too, but I guess I'll give you, guys, one last chance. Any questions that you have, feel free to fire them at me.
I think I'm good, Shane. Thanks again.
Very good. Yeah, if you guys need to go, that's just fine too. You guys have a great night. Thanks again, guys, for joining.
I have a question. Oh,
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's okay. Question.
The testing site, I'm obviously not finding it. I keep looking and I'm not finding it. Where do I go?
Okay. So do you have a tournament ordered?
It's Mayhem in Memphis. It's November 9th.
Okay.
It's
so
actually okay, here's the question, I guess.
Yeah.
My husband's tournament director, but one of the other coaches set up the tournament site with you all, and he set my husband up as a statistician.
Okay.
So that's like giving him, nor I, the testing site that we need in order to play around with everything. So suggestions on that.
Yeah. So a statistician is really, and again, and there's confusion with different user types. So if I look at the different user types, so if I go to users, there's administrators, statisticians, and workers, and we'll work kind of backwards from there. The workers, I would assign worker status or worker logins to people that are going to be maybe working a table or doing registration, some basic data entry. So those are what your workers. That's a limited login, so they're not going to see all the things that we were, seeing tonight. The statisticians are basically just those coaches from a particular team. So that's definitely not what you want from a tournament management standpoint.
Right.
Yeah, so that, and then of course the administrator is what they would want you to be.
Well, I guess we have a little control issue now, don't we?
Yeah, it sounds like you just might.
Yeah, that verifies everything else. So, okay.
Yeah. And they can add you. So they can definitely add you, or they could share that with you if you wanted to.
Okay. Thank you so much. You're so helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. So yeah, you definitely want that. Now, the testing site itself, you can get to it if you notice right here. If you just go to trackwrestlingtesting.com, you can search it just like you do a normal tournament.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Anybody else? I think we still got a couple of you still hanging on the line. Anybody else have questions or?
No, I think I'm good, Shane. You have a good night, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Dick. You too.
Take care.
All right. Shut down the recording then. If anybody has a question for after we stop the recording, that's just fine.